Some parents still worry about their kids going surfing, but today every kid skates.
I think it's a great outlet for them. It really is, physically. It's fantastic, and it's fine as long as they don't get carried away by the whole number, you know, like with anything else. He wipes out on bicycles, he wipes out on skateboards. Same difference.
In the beginning, there was California, skateboarding, sidewalk surfing, sunshine and blonde hair. The surfboards crawled out of the sea and sprouted wheels, finding new waves to ride in swimming pools gone dry. That was the gospel, according to the fledgling industry. A 70s vision of skateboarding, forever linked to its surfing origins and beach culture. And it was good. A frontier tale wrapped in a carefree mystique. That was skateboarding. Or so the story goes. But far beyond that dream, across the country on the East Coast, in the city that was the antithesis of sunny California, imitation was changing shape, adapting to a strange and often unforgiving environment. Survival, it seems, would require reinvention. The beach was nice, but if skateboarding was to be more than a passing fad, it would have to grow up in the streets. An evolution that would take nearly 20 years and a ride that mirrored the fortunes of the city. In the end, skateboarding would find itself reborn and recast, a bona fide son of the city, a world away from its palmy 70s origins. This is New York's story.
Time is running out, and salvation is by no means in sight. New York stands precariously near the edge of default. That is the subject of our broadcast tonight.
American cities grew through the end of the 19th century and dominated U.S. culture through the 1960s. But then things began to change. Industry left, and with it went the workers, often out to suburbia. A bigger house, a lawn, an escape from the American dream gone sour. As white flight emptied the cities of a middle-class tax base, revenues spiraled downward, and cities felt the pinch. Once the pinnacle of American achievement, New York City by 1975 was its rotten core, the last place most Americans wanted to go, especially after dark. It was a lawless place, scary and unfit for families and kids. Drugs and crime were the new growth industry. But that's when things got interesting.
In this great city, you had this tremendous decline in the 70s, and Mark Edmonds, who was the founder and the head of the Soul Artists, I remember him saying, Manhattan isn't new, or New York isn't new, it's a zoo. Zoo York was a kind of a symbolic way of expressing that this great idea, this great dream that New York was, had become collapsed, depraved, like a zoo.
To Mark Edmonds, who tagged Ali, a city on the brink didn't seem like such a bad thing. In the unpoliced streets, Ali saw New York as a canvas for his soul artist crew, and a huge playground for their skate counterparts, who adopted the name Zoo York.
You know, and a lot has to do with the city being in decay for X amount of years. You know, and the window of opportunity for people to run amok and do, you know, mad, like outdoor, like, yeah, I'm taking the city down. You could really take advantage at that time as well. It was a time, it was ripe.
Everybody at that age used to break out of something, and it was like the table was set. Like, you know, your weapon of choice, a skateboard, a marker, you know.
Now, in 1977, when me and my boys were all riding in Riverside Park, one of us figured out, look, Zoo York fits in a cross, just like Dogtown fits in a cross. So then we said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to write Zoo York in a cross and put it on the bottom of our boards. And from that time on, we just started calling ourselves Zoo York. We skated, you know, in the park. We get board skating in the park. We go shoot some hills. We get board skating the hills. We go skate in the street. We get board skating in the street. We go start looking for spots. And as soon as we saw pictures of guys riding, you know, vertical walls in pools, that's what we wanted to do, period.
Monkey wrench? No, I'm not gonna shoot the pump. I just want to work on my bicycle for a little bit. Thanks a lot. I'll bring it right
A diverse group of mostly Upper West Side kids tried to follow the California models shown in the skateboard magazines. Making do without the skate parks and palm trees, they improvised their own interpretation of the glossy dreamland in the magazines.
You know, it was like a total adrenaline injection where I was like, oh, fuck, it's real. And like these photos would just fuel our fantasies, even though our reality here in New York was a much more harsh reality than all of those photos.
The great thing about New York City is that wherever we wanted to go, we can go, and we'd go for free. The subway network branches out to all boroughs. We would hear of places in Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, you know, even Staten Island, and we'd go out there. So we were able to explore all these other neighborhoods. The neighborhood I skated my first pool, known as the Deathbowl, was in the Bronx. One of my very good friends, Puppet he goes, you gotta check this out. There's this pool in the Bronx. All I heard was pool. So we go to this place in the Bronx. I believe it's the last stop on the #1 line, 242nd Street, Van Cortlandt. We get off the train, walk a couple blocks. There's this building. I'd say it's about 9 stories tall. People live there, of course. We didn't care. It was a pool. There could have been a dead body there who had gone around. It was the California ghetto dream.
Prior to ever skating any pools, we started building our own ramps, just quarter pipes that would go up. You know, we'd push up to a wall, a handball court wall, or, you know, the wall of a garage, or in a courtyard somewhere.
We never walked. We always had our boards on us. You know, anywhere was, you know, platforms, sidewalks, schools, buses, train cars. We just would terrorize the place.
This old guy who's a taxi driver says, hey, there's some crazy motherfuckers Riverside Drive going up a wall or something. And I said, wow, really? He goes, yeah, they look like a gang. So you go down there, bring your boys. And I was like, oh, I want to check this out. So we went to 96th Street, you know, and we hear people kind of like skateboarding and boards falling. Lo and behold, there's a construction site.
1977, there was a construction site, a big construction wall that went around all the way out and up to 98th Street.
These guys were inside the construction site, and they used some construction materials to build a quarter pipe. My boys, they were done. They were like, I don't want to look at these crazy white boys going up and down this quarter pipe. I'm going home. I stayed and I hung out.
It was our own little world. We could do whatever the hell we wanted to in there, and we did.
In 1979, Mark Edmonds, Ali, called a meeting of about 15 people, sat us around the table, and just busted out Zoo York magazine. Zoo York was sort of only in our imagination on the bottom of skateboards. Mark saw the bigger picture and the potential of it as a movement.
Ali laid it out with the magazine he called Zoo York. In the city's decay was the compost for a whole new scene. Of, by, and for young street artists and skaters. A culture of its own. Except in 1979, no one seemed to be listening.
For the very first time, somebody on our kind of street level actually did something where we branded ourselves.
The Zoo York newsletter was just a call to awareness about what was going on.
Ali's vision was ahead of its time, but it was prophetic. Over the next decade, New York would slowly edge out California as the locus of street and popular culture. Still, kids who'd later wear Zoo York gear never knew who the name came from or why it was written in graffiti style. By the dawn of the 80s, things were looking bleak. Skate parks closed. The industry collapsed. The ranks of skaters dwindled, nearly disappeared. Skateboarding seemed ripe for the museum of forgotten fads, a suitable neighbor for the pet rock and hula hoop. A few entrepreneurs had wrung out the cash, but never looked ahead. In the city, the Zoo York crew fractured and drifted apart. Skateboarder magazine folded. Once it had been the glue for a community scattered far from the California nexus. Now even that was gone. But reports of skating's death were premature. In the void left by Skateboarder magazine, a new, more realistic voice could be heard. It was Thrasher magazine from San Francisco, assembled by the last of the Mohicans in 1981. Scrappy, printed in stark black and white on newsprint, graphically more akin to punk rock than the Beach Boys. It was made by skaters, for skaters.
Hail May! Why don't you hail May? Hail May!
It didn't restrict itself to the domesticated skate park scene in California. It championed a defiant ethic of skater power, of self-reliance. Make your own luck, it told skating scatter diehards. Take back your own backyard. Enter a new blueprint, the rise of the ramp.
Next good Lance Mountain! Push him out!
There was a scene, there was money, there was skate parks. It collapsed. The backyard scene was a conscious decision to try to create a pro scene. So we built ramps or had ramps or found a ramp, went there with all 12 pros in the world, made an article pretending it's something to get other people to do it.
The backyard ramp scene was skateboarding's ticket out of oblivion. They were wooden, U-shaped constructs built to simulate the curves of bowls and pools. With free labor and stolen materials, ramps were a lot cheaper than concrete parks. and started popping up in backyards across the United States. An example of the do-it-yourself attitude at its best. Ramps were great, but a ramp needs open space. And that wasn't happening in urban areas like New York.
There was nothing. There was nothing. And when we started reading the magazines, it was like, oh man, what is this? Like it all was in pools and parks and stuff we didn't have. So we kind of used what we had and started figuring things out on our own. Seeing people skate vert or ditches or whatever, we would apply that to New York because New York is what we had. So we'd be, you know, cruising from one neighborhood to the next, figuring out that, all right, you know, we can grind those curves the way those guys were grinding that ramp, or find more banks and kind of apply what we'd seen, because we saw pictures of people doing inverts and it's like, how the hell are you gonna do that?
Here's Ian Fromm at the Brooklyn Bridge. I like that grainy sort of out of focus, but the goal was to go higher, faster, get more air. The board led them to these new heights.
During the dark ages, Jessica Bard was an adventurous high school student who hung out with the city's shrunken tribe of skaters.
I'm from upstate New York, and then I moved to New York City in 1980 with my mother. So the high school I went to was a small private high school. But one of the things they had was a required photography program. I had unlimited film, free camera. So for 4 years, I photographed as much as I could, being out there in black and white. I always had my camera on me, mostly, right? All these photographs.
Bard's black and white photos captured a bygone time when skating in New York was so off the radar, it barely registered. And if she hadn't been there with her camera, there might be no record of how New York skaters took their next step, adapting the backyard ramp to the city.
So I'd just skate around, and then you'd see a lone skater, and you'd make friends with them. We'd make friends and we'd hang out and we'd skate. That's how it all started.
Every old set was like, well, back in my day, you know, it was different and blah, blah, blah. But in skateboarding, there weren't many kids doing it in '83. So if you saw someone skating, instantly you had a connection and you're just like, what's up, where are you from? So everywhere you went, if you bumped into somebody, like, your crew would kind of grow.
We kept skateboarding alive, you know. No skate shops, no nothing. No contests, no photos, none. Fuck that. I mean, I don't want to sound emotional, but we were the dying breed to survive. I can count on one hand how many niggas skateboarded in New York City in '83 and '84. If you saw somebody with the holes in their shoes, that nigga was a skateboarder, you know? No, I'm proud to say I had holes in my shoes, because if you saw my shoes, you say, yo, that nigga get busy.
I used to have to fight over garbage cans with people who sold fake Rolexes and stuff, because they would use the garbage cans to display their wares and stuff. So when I would come into the park, they would start grabbing the garbage cans and pulling them away and going, Steve, this is mine. Oh, excuse me. This is mine. This is mine. You know? And then I would get into wrestling matches over the garbage cans with them and like threaten them. And
with its history as a stomping ground for artists, Beat Generation poets and writers, Washington Square Park in the heart of the village was a community meeting place for all manner of citizens. A democracy of derelicts, drug dealers and buyers, street performers, buskers, and skaters.
Oh, fuck. I can't do it anymore. This is how I put myself through college, and I don't think anyone will watch this crap anymore, but I don't care. I'm gonna place this banana peel right here on the board I plan on landing on. Now imagine if I land on that banana peel at over 50 miles an hour. I am done. I'm already done, but will you shut up? So in Washington Square Park, there were a lot of garbage cans, and there was a breakdance crew out there one day making some money, doing a show and stuff, and I started jumping garbage cans, and the crowd got a lot bigger. And I put up 3, and then I put up 4, and then the crowd got really big, and then I put up 5, and the crowd was gigantic. I mean, I couldn't believe, it was like a sea of people. And I didn't know anything about collecting money or anything from this crowd, but it got me thinking, if I started putting my own gloss on this whole thing, really relating to these people in some stupid way, I could make a lot of money jumping over garbage cans with skateboards. Beyond corn syrup! Thank you, folks. Thank you. I couldn't have done that jump without you. You folks are wonderful. I'll be appearing at Carnegie Hall next Monday night.
In 1985, the California skate company, Powell Peralta, debuted a new video portraying New York as a viable, even exciting place to skate, and brought the city, and more importantly, the notion of riding anything and everything to the masses. The skaters in Future Primitive, established pros from the West Coast, were basically screwing around and doing what was still considered a substitute for ramp riding. But they were also using New York's infrastructure to whatever ends were available.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of it was the aesthetic of it, the fact that it was city, and to show that these guys are not just from California, and not necessarily to spread it to New York only, but use New York to spread it to other places.
The creative minds behind the video knew that there was a huge potential audience for skateboarding made up of kids who didn't have access to ramps, and they used Future Primitive and New York to sell that idea.
Never even thought about going into the city until after I saw Future Primitive. I saw Lance Mountain, Steve Caballero skating on the East Coast, skating in New York City, which was 40 minutes from where we lived.
Like many kids who came of age skating the city, Mike Vallely hailed from outside New York, in his case across the Hudson River in Edison, New Jersey. Coming in from the suburbs, his formative years were spent exploring all Manhattan had to offer. He quickly became one of street skating's early pioneers, making the transition from adapting ramp tricks to the street to inventing entirely new maneuvers. He was one of the first ripples of the new wave.
I got to participate in the birth of something. You know, it was still being created. The concept was there. Utilize your environment. Street style, street skating. I was lucky enough to be one of those kids that got to develop it, you know, mold it, create it. And everyone who was skating at that time was participating in that. We were out in the streets and we were making it happen. And once we saw guys start riding up walls and we saw, you know, possibilities seemed limitless. Anything was skateable. Everything was skateable.
New York City was like the hub, the height of cool, you know? And, you know, the suburban kids would band together and ride the train, and you come up out of the subway and you're just like, whoa, dude, this is so crazy. Because it's like a natural skate park, you know?
Skateboarding is skateboarding, right? Wrong. If you're a city dweller, skating takes on certain elements you may not find elsewhere. Police harassment around the clock, crowds, and traffic. But all this just adds to your creativity. And if you look at it right, even New York is really a skate park.
I'm a soldier at war, making sure you don't try to battle me no more.
It may surprise some people, but skaters in New York say they're much more easygoing than their counterparts in California.
In the West, it seems there's a lot of competition minded, like win, lose, like it's like that there. Here, it's more like friendly, it's for fun, more or less.
There, they worry too much about fashion, what their clothes look like, how their hair is going to be combed that day.
They don't know what it's like to go skate in the middle of snow or like go get chased by bums in a hood.
They don't know that, man.
They don't know that.
Life on the frontier was no picnic. By the mid-'80s, skaters were scoping out sketchy neighborhoods, riding where even most hardened New Yorkers feared to tread. In the chaos of New York, skating had found its perfect laboratory. But how it went in and emerged a different creature is hard to explain without looking back into skateboarding's history and development. Back in 1978, a Florida skater named Alan Gelfand invented the ollie. Gelfand did an aerial in which he flew out of the ramp and turned 180 degrees without grabbing the board. This was revolutionary in the world of ramps and pools. But it would be years before the ollie's most explosive achievement would be realized in the streets. And then there was freestyle.
Well, freestyle is basically technical skateboarding on steroids. You don't use what the street environment provides you with. You essentially use just flat ground and your skateboard.
Freestylers were much maligned and easy to make fun of, but they were the first skaters to make the inspired leap of adapting the ollie from ramps and pools to flat ground. A couple of years after Gelfand's breakthrough, freestylers started doing something called ollie pops, with the skater popping their tail on the ground hard enough to propel themselves a few inches into the air before landing in the same spot. By combining the ollie with technical board flipping tricks, freestylers helped forge the template for what was to become modern street skating.
Skateboarding really lost out by not appreciating freestyle for all those years. Skateboarders, they go off their feelings. They didn't look at that amazing stuff. Let me take that and do something good with it.
I'm like, yo, I never seen no shit like this in my life. And the guy takes a board and he turns it, like these are the wheels here, and he turns it like this. And then he starts skating towards it. So, yo, what the fuck he gonna do? Crash into it? He can't jump over it because there's no board on the other side. Motherfucker jumps over it. I said, oh shit, I gotta do that.
Then, in 1986, when the ollie evolved from a flat ground static trick to a propulsive forward-moving leap, a paradigm shift of massive proportions occurred. No longer was the city just a two-dimensional plane. It had now become a three-dimensional all-around environment in which obstacles and barriers, steps and ledges, handrails and curbs could be ollied onto, over, and down. The ollie changed everything.
Slide down that thing right there. Yeah, slide right there. That was nuts. Want to try it again? Yeah, try it, good. All right, you gotta look out there. I'll hit you. Go ahead. Hey, go on that side, go on that side. This hand railing here was probably, as far as like hand railings go, was ideal. It was really low. It was about this big. It came up to here, and it was about that wide, just a square metal block. And these guys hated us, and it became like a thing, like wait for the doorman to go in, run up and start doing whatever. And then Gons came and visited Jeremy Henderson, you know, and Gons was like, I can grind this. And everyone was like, no, you can't.
One more time. One more time and I'll make it.
The ollie, though, needed a trickster, and Mark Gonzalez was one of street skating's ultimate magicians. A well-known pro skater from Los Angeles who early on saw the potential of bringing freestyle tricks to the street, he took the ollie into a newer, faster, and higher realm. Gonzalez's riding and antics during his mid-decade visits to New York made a lasting impression on the locals. The Gons, as he came to be known, had a huge impact on how New York skaters looked at their surroundings.
How about Broadway and 8th Street? You know all that traffic there?
Fucking A. Broadway and 8th Street it is. Yeah, babe.
It was amazing, like when the Gons or Nada, so these guys would show up and they were like, fuck yeah, this is fun. City skating became like linking spots. And then you'd always link up with dudes who were in different, beep, 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 beep. You know, we were all kind of bouncing around like digital super balls, you know, from spot to spot, like crews of 6 or 8 or whatever. Usually not much more than that.
That's what was the beauty about when Gons would come to New York, is because it was the biggest canvas for him to fuck with, and he would just roam through the city and paint his trail, and we would all roll behind him and be like, oh wow, you see that? And you'd stumble over your board watching that, you know, onto the next thing that would happen.
This is a rental.
One more time and I'll make it.
And like, sure enough, man, he came back and ground it. And I think that may be the first time someone ever 50-50 to hand railing was right here. And then Gons came and visited Jeremy Henderson.
New York's energy and wide-open possibilities have always attracted free thinkers and imaginative misfits. In the mid to late 1980s, an older skater and artist named Jeremy Henderson, who was a little of both, moved into a loft at the drug-infested corner of Stanton and Ludlow on Manhattan's Lower East Side. This was the meeting place where skaters were influenced by the artistically fertile environment.
Having your own loft and having, like, you know, a bunch of paint and, you know, an open center for people to do it was like, you're not going to have birds unless you have birdhouses with bird seed and bird feed. So if you have a space that's open, you can have, you know, a scene grow.
Not to sound like cliche, but like every time you went there, there was something creative going on. You're like skating and then drawing and painting, and he's like, you know, sculpt something. You know, he like gives you like a hunk of clay or like some wood and a whittling knife. He's like, figure it out.
He was, you know, he's a pretty big artist. He had this crazy apartment. He had like this, probably like 20,000 records like lined up all over the apartment, and, you know, canvases everywhere.
Just hanging out all day, listening to records, and then just going skating all day long, man. He was like the guru of New York City skateboarding, I suppose. Like, he was like the godfather.
He was beyond his years in his ability with his skateboarding, and he was an older brother figure to quite a few of us that were skateboarding, and there was a really pretty tight-knit family.
This is actually a drawing by Peter Hunt of my loft. It's a corner porcelain with a speaker and a little like gorilla piggy bank and a Phillies bump box with a chick on it. Stanton Street had enough anonymity and enough open ideology and space for us to actually sit back and do drawings about the New World Order. It was a sanctuary for guys to come hang with Jeremy and his boys. And this is the time when we were figuring it out. You know, but it's kind of, you know, art and skateboarding go together. They're both creative, they're both from the same place in the mind and the consciousness, and they're both reacting to the space of architecture.
Jeremy's loft was a hangout spot, but skateboarding was happening in the streets. And New York skaters wanted to ride their own boards.
You see that? No, this is history.
That's like 4 feet high.
That's a backside 180 ollie over a bench. That's easy, 87, 88. Yeah. Easy.
It's somewhere there, yeah.
87, 88.
That's still with a hand-cut board.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking. I'm talking about power. I'm talking about raw. Sean Sheffy, Shut Skateboards. Yo, Shut was the illest team out there. They had the best guys. Coco Santiago, Billy Wallman, Jeff Pang, Sean Sheffy, Brian Blake. No one knows who Brian Blake is.
Mike Kepper.
Mike Kepper. You went to the banks, you saw those guys, you wanted to skate hard. You wanted to be ill because, yo, Shut guys were there. Yo, the Shut guys were there. The Shut guys were there. You know? You remember that shit. It was like seeing a celebrity. It was better than seeing a celebrity.
Since the first manufactured boards were sold in 1963, there had been hardly any skate companies from outside California, and certainly none from New York. Then, in 1986, Shut Skates surfaced. It was a homegrown, collaborative affair led by Rodney Smith and Bruno Musso, two dyed-in-the-wool city skaters. Theirs was the first street-only team, with no connection to ramps and pools and the California blonde, blue-eyed ideal. In this, Shut was truly revolutionary.
There was the late 80s explosion in skateboarding, and it was very popular, and ramps started going up, and parks started going up. And our whole deal was kind of separate to that, because we were more about New York City and the street and everything that encompassed, art, music, whatever. And that got reflected in our graphics and reflected in the people that rode for us and where the company went. We just kind of started making boards for ourselves because we kept breaking everything, and the boards that were out there didn't really work that well for what we were doing.
Bruno, myself, Alyasha, Beasley, Jeremy, sort of like, it's gotta be something better out there. So essentially Bruno gets a box of boards one day. He's like, I got a box of boards. Like, we're cutting boards, where are we cutting them?
The first boards we made were on Ollie's roof in Brooklyn.
We had like some milk crates and my mom's jigsaw and my mom's drill with a sanding disc. So we cut like a bunch of boards.
For the first year, we probably made 4,000 boards by hand.
What set Shut apart is the same thing that made the other companies what they were. It's like you're a product of your environment. If we're coming through these streets that are so raw, it's like, why should your boards or your attire or your clothes be any different? Shut was part of a lifestyle of the people living in the Jersey, New York area, same way as all these guys on the West Coast were a product of the surf environment.
Shut's fucking genius in a sense, because what occurred with Shut is that it became Bruno Musso and Rodney Smith's business. But we all skated here all the time anyways, but all of a sudden we were Shut, Team Shut, you know what I mean? We stenciled Shut on the top of the boards and, you know, just 4 letters, like fuck. Kind of like just what we came up with, you know, at the time.
All I was trying to do was be a skate photographer. And I came back to New York. Rod and Bruno had taken Shut from what it was to actually having a team and boards and riders who I'd never seen before, never met before, and who killed it. And a lot of these photos are from like those first few times I ever shot with those guys.
You know, we look at the magazines and the Pow videos, and I ain't taking nothing from them. That's what we had to look up to. But Shut was what we had. That was something that we could be proud of as skaters in New York City.
And it got to the point where our guys started turning pro. The bigger companies had resources that we didn't. And I knew in the end, I mean, when you got companies selling that much product that can offer these kids things that we couldn't, of course.
In a sense, Shut had gotten ahead of itself. It was homegrown. It was a family. But it was like a garage band getting its talent picked. Shut riders who'd made their bones on the East Coast were lured away by more lucrative deals in California. They'd become pros, and their New York aura and brand of skating were in demand for companies pushing the hot, new street style from the office parks of Southern California. Shut would close its doors, a victim of its own success. But when one door closes, another opens. What Shut left in its wake was a whole new crop of kids from every neighborhood in the 5 boroughs. But no matter what they looked like or where they were from, sooner or later, every skater in the city would find their way to the meeting spot.
It was not with the intention of creating a recreational area, honestly. That I can pretty well assure you. But it's interesting that it became that. And I think, just as an aside and a non sequitur, what is fascinating to me is how we interpret our environment, how we use our imagination to do things, involve ourselves in activities that were not intended, that we create an opportunity out of what we see. And I think that's a very creative part of life.
Shut had helped reimagine the who of skating, but the who needed a where, and it was waiting downtown in the shadow of City Hall, an abandoned scrap of New York called the Brooklyn Banks. It looked like a wave, if a wave was made of brick. Here under the Brooklyn Bridge was the melting pot, a common ground for kids from the 5 boroughs and beyond, a space where vertical, freestyle, and street skating intermingled, along with skaters that looked, well, they looked like New York.
You'd go to the Banks on a Saturday and it'd be like, freaking 500 kids there skating from all over the place, from, all the boroughs of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut.
That's where we would meet all the other dudes from the outer boroughs and stuff.
First time I went to the Banks, it blew my mind.
That was like the nucleus of the skate itself.
Like, you couldn't walk in the Banks.
That was the meeting spot.
Everybody came together there.
You're skating underneath the Brooklyn Bridge.
I saw skateboarding evolve through the 80s.
We would skate the Banks all day.
It's the Banks.
Called the Brooklyn Banks.
The Brooklyn Banks.
It's called the Brooklyn Banks. But it's in Manhattan.
Cliques from each borough would just come there and meet, and that was the spot. It was just like a gang of skaters from everywhere.
After I went to the Banks, and then I would go back uptown, and I still was skating in my area, like during the week. But weekends, it's the Banks.
The Banks were always a meeting place. Kids from Brooklyn, kids from Jersey, kids from the Bronx, kids from Queens or Long Island would, all meet up. I mean, that's how I met all my friends.
The Brooklyn Banks had a galvanizing effect on generations of New York skaters. But it was more than just a meeting spot. It was also a breakout point. From there, bands of kids would search out new terrain all over the city, and one crew would have proof.
Hello, Alex.
Yeah. Just like looking at videos and like film and the MTV thing starting and all that, I just fell in love with like the whole like image and how people shot things. And my parents got a video camera, of course, because it would be like a family thing, and I kind of like adopted it
and then started using it just for skateboarding and just to shoot all my friends and myself. I had like TV, VCR, camera connected, had this weird ass like stereo, so I figured out a way to put music into it. It was a trip.
Along with the ollie and skating's growth, new advancements in technology made inexpensive, portable video cameras a reality and helped push skateboarding forward. This was a huge change. Now, instead of only established companies producing big-budget skate videos, skaters could make their own, building on the long-running tradition of self-representation. They weren't just watching the story anymore. They were the story. And the storytellers.
We tote around the camera and just film everything you do, pretty much.
You know, we would just make our own skate videos just to have. You know, again, we look at videos and try to learn those tricks, and we document it ourselves.
Strange reason, a lot of these financial buildings are like, in a way, built for skating. You know, all these, nice marble ledges, and handrails, and stairs, and all these things. So
nothing is humdrum in this relatively small spot on the East Coast. Ever new, New York changes and grows. Almost 6.5 million square feet of office space will spring up in a single busy year. Modern castles of business and industry.
New York City pioneered the first zoning resolution that was comprehensive in application in 1916. It was a revolutionary document at the time, and it, among other things, controlled effectively the heights of buildings in the city. Over the succeeding decades, lots of skyscrapers were built under that zoning resolution. But for a variety of reasons, the city realized post-World War II that it should rethink the kind of zoning controls that it had for its large office and residential buildings. And one of the innovations that was introduced was a small little element known as incentive zoning, in which developers who agreed to provide plazas would be encouraged to do so because they would be allowed to build a slightly larger building. That was the birth of this now enormously influential program of law that has sculpted the streetscape of New York City.
What New York skaters had at their disposal was a city like no other in America. A dense metropolis full of modern architecture that included a specific type of public space vital to the evolution of skating: the plaza. Ramps were out. The artifacts of the urban landscape were in. Curbs, benches, railings, steps, embankments. It was like skaters had a mole in the city planning office.
You know, there's plazas everywhere. We had endless terrain. We had stairs, banks, handrails. I mean, we would push from the banks to Midtown, no problem, and hit thousands of spots on the way. And the security guards didn't even know what to do. So it was open game everywhere. It was just like plazas for days.
New York City is a perfect example of people who don't skateboard building something and then skateboarders using it to, do their thing. It's kind of a flukish relationship.
was so much to skate. And you gotta remember, New York is a growing city. They fucking building after building after building after building. There was all kinds of new shit through the late 80s and early 90s.
Ledges, stairs with ledges, embankments, railings.
There was no, let's jump in a car and let's go to a spot. All we had was a token and our skateboard. You know, you just utilize everything that's in the city, like, for yourself. It's our, like, huge playground that we have.
We don't give a fuck with what you did, what stock you stole. We want to skate the ledge. We don't care about whatever you're doing, what you're doing in your office. This is what we care about, you know? And not getting caught by a security guard.
When I started to study public spaces in New York City, I didn't think of skateboarding or other kinds of activities that might take place in the spaces. But in the course of my early visits, I suddenly came across activities that I hadn't anticipated being there. And in one of them, I came across a whole bunch of skateboarders, and I realized that these spaces could accommodate an even wider range of activities than I had thought.
Thinking of a master plan. This ain't nothing but sweat inside my hands. So I dig into my pocket, all my money spent. So I get deeper, but still coming up with lint. So I start my mission, leave my residence, thinking how could I get some dead presidents? I need money.
New York's skate scene was ready for its next act. Rodney Smith from Shut Skates and his new partners Eli Gesner and Adam Schatz launched a company they called Zoo York, unconnected to the 70s crew, except in name.
Shut came in the tail end of the 80s skateboarding era, and we were moving into the 90s, and things were moving fairly quickly. Street skating was being recognized, and at the end of Shut, I knew that I had to put something together that was going to continue that legacy to the early start of Zoo York. And the time was totally right.
15 years after the original Zoo York crew planted the seeds, a new city style was flowering. In the city's unlikely environment, a fresh breed of skating had taken root. The second coming of Zoo York, this time as a business, may have seemed to some like an appropriation, but it confirmed what was happening. Now, the time was right.
Skip the introduction, pulsate the lip function. The junction get rushed by some grimy people busting weed.
It was like the rebirth of Shut was when Zoo York started. And that kind of brought the limelight back over to the East Coast, bringing it like graffiti together with hip hop, which is New York City culture at its finest.
It was really good timing. Like a lot of things happened really great for us in the 90s here because of the media coverage became more consistent. We started Zoo York, but it was also just like one of those moments in time where kind of everything comes together.
Zoo York started getting that kind of that vibe. Like, yo, these are the guys to fucking look for. This is the new, resurgence of skateboarding out of New York City.
I guess right around the time Supreme opened up is when the city, the skateboarding scene got big. Just all happened at the same time, I think. You know, people started recognizing New York as a big skateboarding thing. Then it went from nothing to like, you know, this big thing overnight, you know what I mean? We're all getting sponsored, we're all, you know, being in the magazines every month and getting to go everywhere. Yeah, it was a pretty big change.
The new breed of skaters, and here we are all together and everyone's getting coverage and Supreme logo everywhere.
The Supreme store on Lafayette Street manifested the new reality in which New York skaters were cool, not the unknowns of the past. It was a skate emporium based on an understanding of the shift in attitude towards skaters and their scene.
Added to pronouns had no style. The weak propose out ain't the official. Initial is ruler zigzag zigzag. Or the other portion ain't permissible. Annual increase of the Wu-Tang manual. Handles to keep all this true hip-hop shit tangible and legible. Every egg ain't edible. My tracks remain unforgettable. How you guys doing?
Perhaps Harold Hunter embodied this new state of affairs more than anyone else. A kid who came out of the Campos Plaza projects on East 13th Street. His skating and irrepressible personality eventually sent him on a path from the inner city to worldwide fame, all because of a chance encounter with skateboarding.
I guess he helped blow up New York in skateboarding at that time. He came from the ghetto, and to see him like make it successful back then in New York, not too many people I knew was doing that. You know, Harold was doing it, and the kids took it to a whole nother level.
And then Larry Clark showed up and made Kids. I mean, if you see Kids, that's pretty much like everybody who was like really seriously skating at that time, you know?
I wanted to make a film that hadn't been made before. I wanted to make a film that kids could look at and say, hey, maybe that's not me, but it's not bullshit. It feels right, it seems right, you know, it seems real. And then when I came back to New York, I went to Washington Square. And I thought the skateboarding kids were the you know, visually the most exciting kids, the most interesting kids. Plus, everybody hated them, you know, because they had this freedom that really intimidated adults and authority figures and cops.
Going out tonight? Yeah, maybe NASA or some shit. On where? Yeah. You on the list? Probably. Fuck that shit. I'll sneak it, you know what I'm saying? I need some female vagina tonight. I had female vagina last night. You did?
Skating in New York had reached the tipping point. New York was successful beyond anybody's wildest dreams. And so was Supreme, and so was the movie Kids. Skating's increased visibility and New York becoming a cleaned up, more regulated place. It got harder to skate in the city without resistance.
Is he with you? He's filming him. Is he with you? Yeah, but what do you do, man? Well, get him out of here.
Rudolph Giuliani's election to mayor was partly to blame, along with the city's newfound appeal. Skating's popularity coincided with the city's, and this brought skaters into conflict with the owners and caretakers of their favored playgrounds. It was no longer as easy as it had been for kids to run wild in the streets.
We want to show people improvement in the quality of their life, that things are getting better for them, that things are safer, quieter, more peaceful, a city that they can use and enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Washington Square Park is now closed.
Do we have a pedal license on us by chance?
Everything changed when Giuliani was elected mayor. They started arresting people, busting people for having a can of beer with a paper sack, which everybody always had. for everything, you know. And now it's all gentrified. You almost have to be rich to live in New York. They're pushing everybody out. So it's changed a lot, but it was much funkier and much freer and a lot more fun.
It almost seemed like they hired security at night just to kick out skateboarders. Like they had one security guard that patrolled like 8 of the office plazas. So he just followed us around with a Rottweiler and just chase all the skateboarders around.
So we never really looked at it like, were these things made for skating? We're just like, yo, these shits are skatable, we skating them. Period. No more to it. We skating that, you're gonna kick us all right, later, psh, see you next week. We'll be back.
Come on, we're not babies, man. You can't fucking deal here. I don't give a fuck what you do over there. But this ground is off limits right now.
You're not taking mine away. You're on company property, I'm gonna take it away. I understand that. We can't just try one more time and film me something.
No.
Why not?
No, because this asshole gave me trouble before, that's why.
Him?
Why don't you point that shit the other way, man?
Extreme skateboarding.
Wanna be skate freaks like us? Bam here gonna show you how new right.
Everybody is skateboarding. You know, it's the same old story that you heard, like, where someone says, oh, it used to be that if you saw someone with a skateboard, or you saw someone with, like, some ollie wear on their shoes, you'd instantly have this bond with them, and then you could talk to them, things like that. Yeah, everybody knows that that went away because skateboarding got a little bit popular. Now it's to the point where on any given day, you know, every 3 blocks you'll see someone skating. You know, it's definitely different, and it's because it's everywhere.
25 years after its brush with bankruptcy, New York began to enjoy an unprecedented renaissance. The city that lost 1 million in population between 1970 and 1980 had stabilized, and by 1990 was starting to grow again. The city wasn't just getting bigger, it was getting richer, or at least the rich were getting richer. Along with New York going mainstream, skateboarding expanded and achieved a level of visibility it had never had before. It got big, went global, generated a lot of money, and every day attracted new participants and the hordes that wanted to look like participants. Through this evolution, skateboarding has had to learn to adapt once again.
Even though it's so small, it's always being built on and being replaced, that it's still brand new. New York City can't grow out, so they just keep replacing, tearing down.
Where there were once, you know, mom and pop shops, they're now boutiques and bars and restaurants. Where there were tenement buildings, they're now high rises. You'll walk down a block and, you know, entire blocks are gone. It's like, you know, where'd that block go?
In the early 90s, you could go to fucking, to LA or anywhere and be like, New York, New York, New York, New York, and people would be like, oh shit, New York, you know? Because it was a crazy place. But now, this place is safe. Quality of life. Giuliani came in, you know, say cleaned it up. So like I said, you can walk down Avenue A and nothing's gonna happen to you. It's like a bad episode of Friends, you know what I mean?
It's lost its vibe. I mean, it's sad to say, but the city is not the same anymore. You know what I'm saying? The city was the people there, and somehow the people lost the city.
But I felt like there was a time where you could do anything in the city, where you would see kids throwing cans of soda at old people, things like that, and you'd just be like, what the fuck? Maybe that's why shit got cleaned up.
No matter how great any time looks in retrospect, the thing to remember is that everyone who's part of that time came here for something else, and they missed it. People who came here for punk rock, people who came here for the 60s, some people came here for the art boom of the 80s, you know, whatever they came here for. It's gone. And so basically all these people come here and they have to reinvent their own thing.
Now, skateboarding is a billion-dollar industry, a pastime on its way to Little League-style blandness and acceptance. But it still harbors a lesser-known, more secretive side, the outlaw renegade aspect that has been there from the beginning. The urge to reclaim the city's detritus, the activation of the was not meant to be used. Different kinds of terrain, perhaps, different environments, certainly a different time, but the inventive creativity that has always epitomized skateboarding lives on.
I look for certain spots that hold possibilities. It gets a little difficult dealing with, you know, certain things that you see on a sidewalk. There could be an amazing spot, but you have to wait until like 3 in the morning to skate it. And then 3 in the morning, you gotta deal with making noise and waking up Joe Blow, who's trying to sleep, you know, because whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like the planets need to be aligned for some of these spots to be able to skate them, you know?
The spots that we skate now have always been there, and they're just untouched. All the newer guys just are like, I'm sick of skating the same old shit. Let's go meander into some sketchy neighborhoods, just posse up, fucking 6 or 7 deep, and do this.
We all came here from out of town. None of us are from New York, but as soon as we got here, we realized that this was where we wanted to be. This was pretty much the illest place in the world, as far as we're all concerned. We set out to just cover the city and find everything we possibly could and just immerse ourselves in New York. Sometimes we take the ferry out to Staten, sometimes we drive somewhere. Usually we just take the train wherever and then just start covering blocks. So many days we would go skating for 8 hours or more a day and not find a goddamn thing.
I got a whole little kit that I take out and then just drive around, get lost, look for stuff, hit like every street in that area, take a photo of the spots, take a photo of the street signs, and then you just come over here, mark it down, and just fucking put a dot on the map, and then you'll remember where it's at. You need the right eye to like find this type of stuff that I like to skate, you know? A lot of people will just be like, what's the spot? I don't get it. It's like, I don't know. You need kind of a creative eye.
Then we just started coming up here and just look at the train map and we'd just be like, all right, we'll get off here today and we'll just go cruise around. And like just did that for one whole summer. Go left. It's this park right here. That's how we found like everything out here.
If you want to skate something new, you gotta put the time in. You gotta go out to spots nobody will ever go to unless they're doing what you're doing. Go to the Bronx, drive around on rainy days, trying to get lost.
See how all the slants come down from the building? There's benches next to those at the bottom. Yeah, first time we skated here, an old lady came by, like, telling us to be careful. Watch out for people, like, throwing bottles out the windows.
The last time we went there, my roommate Jeff was filming me do a trick, and all of a sudden we just hear this psh, and Jeff's like, ah, my neck. Somebody just shot me. Sure enough, some little kids had just taken a shot at him with a BB gun and popped him in his neck.
A lot of people too are realizing like Manhattan's not the only place to go skating in New York. And that's the best thing too, man. It just keeps going back to like finding new shit. You'll be like, all right, let's go out to this spot way out on Utica Avenue.
You're like, all right, and then instead of getting off at the train stop that's closest, maybe you would take one farther out or get off one early and just try to look around. You'll find 10 new spots on the way there.
Scout out the boroughs. Believe it or not, you'll find something that someone like myself who's been here my whole life hasn't. You're always bound to find something in the most random places. But the best thing about the city is you could just go out there and cruise and make it your playground.
As much as I might say, like skateboarding was different back then, or like we might say, one generation might say, oh, it was so much different then than it is now, blah, 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 whatever. The thing that we all share in common is like that thrill, like it is just rolling down the street. So that's what I have in common with every other skater in New York City.
So it came to pass that skateboarding became, head to toe, a city kid. It had taken a few generations and a cast of thousands. But in the end, skateboarding was transformed by the city. That is New York's story.